All right, so get ready because today's deep dive is going to be a little different.
Yeah.
We're tackling a topic that's, super subjective opinions on appearances.
Right.
And we're using a list from the Top 10's website. And it's called Ugliest Female Celebrities as our jumping off point.
Yeah.
Now, before you think we're like endorsing this list or anything, we're not.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This isn't about agreeing or disagreeing with the list itself.
Right.
Instead, we're going to use this list as a way to kind of dissect how society views beauty.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to women in the public eye and how these online spaces can sometimes become breeding grounds for pretty harsh judgments.
Yeah, it's kind of like holding up a mirror to our culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we see as beautiful, or in the case, ugly, can actually tell us a lot about our values.
Definitely.
And how quick we are to judge others. We love our top 10 lists.
We do.
They make things simple. They give us a sense of order. And let's be honest, we all kind of crave those quick and easy answers.
Absolutely. Those lists create this feeling that we're all on the same page,
Right.
even if the list is based on totally subjective opinions.
Totally.
But, when you have a list that's specifically targeting the appearance of female celebrities, it really highlights that intense scrutiny that women in the spotlight face constantly.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. They're not just judged on their talent, but also on every little perceived flaw.
That makes me wonder, why is there this extra layer of pressure on women in Hollywood?
Right.
I mean, it's not enough to be talented. They have to fit into this incredibly narrow mold of what's considered beautiful.
Well, one thing to consider is how deeply ingrained these societal expectations are, particularly about how women should age and behave.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond just physical features. Like, there's this underlying message that a woman's worth is somehow tied to her appearance, and that can be incredibly damaging.
Okay, so let's dive into some examples from the list to kind of see this in action.
Sure.
The top 10s has Sarah Jessica Parker at the very top.
Okay.
A lot of the comments called her looks overrated or implied she only got to where she is because of who she knows.
Right.
It's interesting how some went beyond just her appearance.
Yeah, it's almost as if some people believe that powerful women, especially if they don't fit conventional beauty standards, must have gotten there through unfair means.
Yeah.
As if they couldn't possibly have achieved success based on talent and hard work.
Right.
And unfortunately, it gets even darker than that.
Yeah.
There are comments comparing her to a witch, even bringing up the Salem witch trials.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
It's scary how online anonymity can make people so bold with their cruelty.
Right.
Do you think that kind of language is rooted in misogyny?
Oh, there's definitely a connection there.
Yeah.
Historically, women who defied expectations or held positions of power were often demonized or labeled as dangerous. And this language, even if disguised as humor, seems to tap into that same fear of female power.
Okay.
Especially if that power doesn't align with traditional notions of beauty.
Next on the list is Rosie O'Donnell.
Okay.
And the comments about her are pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Attacking not just how she looks, but her personality too.
You see a lot of gendered insults thrown around, accusing her of manly behavior.
Oh, gosh.
Using language that's clearly intended to diminish her. It's as if her outspokenness and refusal to conform to those traditional feminine norms somehow contribute to her perceived ugliness.
It makes you think, how much do our preconceived notions about how a woman should act influence how we see her physically?
It's definitely intertwined.
Right.
These societal expectations about gender roles, behavior, even humor,
all
play into how we perceive and judge women's appearances.
Then we have Jocelyn Wildenstein, who's known for her extensive plastic surgery.
Right.
Most of the comments zero in on her altered appearance, comparing her to a cat lady.
Her situation brings up some interesting questions about our fascination with transformation.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe even a fear of anything that deviates too far from what we consider normal.
It makes you wonder, what does it say about society when someone's personal choices about their body become the target of such harsh judgment?
It's complicated. On the one hand, we have this fascination with self-improvement.
Yeah.
And achieving a certain ideal. But then there's also this underlying fear of artificiality.
Right.
Of people who seem to have too much control over their appearance.
So taking a step back, what do you think these top 3 entries tell us about the criteria we use to judge a woman's appearance?
Yeah.
It feels like it's not just about physical features at all.
You're absolutely right. It's much more layered than that.
Yeah.
We see ageism, body shaming, and even this tendency to connect beauty with being likable or morally good. Like, this list isn't just about who's considered unattractive.
Right.
It's about all the baggage that comes with those judgments.
It's as if there's this unspoken expectation that women should fight against aging.
Yeah.
That their worth diminishes as they get older.
And that highlights the double standard women face as they age.
Yeah.
It's as if men get to be distinguished with age, but women are expected to stay youthful or they risk becoming invisible.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
You mentioned baggage.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing some recurring themes popping up in these comments.
Yeah.
One that jumped out at me is this link between a person's looks and their character.
Right.
It's like people equate physical appearance with morality.
Right. Take the comments about Paris Hilton and Yoko Ono, for example.
Okay.
In Hilton's case, allegations of animal abuse are brought up. And with Ono, it's the perception that she broke up the Beatles.
Wow.
Both situations are cited as reasons for their ugliness.
Right.
Which is a really disturbing connection to make.
It makes you wonder, are we subconsciously punishing women who defy societal expectations by labeling them as unattractive?
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
It's almost as if we struggle to reconcile the idea of a woman who breaks the rules with the idea of her being beautiful. It challenges our deeply ingrained beliefs about how women should behave and look.
Another theme that keeps popping up is ageism. Yeah. Especially towards older female celebrities.
The language used to describe Joan Rivers, Roseanne Barr, and Donatella Versace is especially harsh.
Wow.
It reflects this anxiety our culture has about women aging, especially in an industry that worships youth and beauty.
Like there's this pressure on women to fight tooth and nail against getting older.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they're somehow failing.
It's a powerful example of how those societal expectations intersect with perceptions of beauty and how incredibly limiting those expectations can be, especially for women. And importantly, many of those comments dehumanize and objectify these women.
Oh, wow.
Reducing them to their physical attributes rather than acknowledging their full personhood.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
It reminds us that these are real people with feelings and lives beyond the screen.
Right.
Not just characters we can dissect and judge without consequence.
Exactly. And that brings up another interesting observation.
Okay.
The idea of good ugly versus bad ugly.
Okay.
Even within this list, there seems to be a hierarchy of who's considered acceptable and who isn't.
You're right, like with Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
While the comments acknowledge her struggles with addiction, there's a sense of sympathy there, a sadness that's absent in the comments about other women on the list.
It's as if her talent or her perceived vulnerabilities somehow makes her unconventional looks more acceptable.
Interesting.
It suggests that our perception of someone's character can influence how we perceive their physical features.
That's interesting. It's like we're more forgiving of unconventional looks if we admire someone's work or see them as a good person.
It really shows the complexity of our judgments and how easily they can be swayed by factors that have nothing to do with physical appearance.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about race and representation.
Okay.
We can't ignore the fact that Black women are overrepresented on this list.
Right.
And the insults directed at them are often specifically tied to their race.
The comments about Oprah Winfrey, for example, often use racist tropes about Black women's features. And the criticism of Nicki Minaj's body frequently focuses on her curves in a way that reflects the hypersexualization of Black women's bodies.
It's a sad reminder of how deeply ingrained racism is in our culture.
It is.
And how that racism shapes our very ideas of what's considered beautiful.
These comments are rooted in a long history of objectifying and exoticizing Black women's bodies, reducing them to stereotypes and denying them the full spectrum of human beauty.
It's a sobering reminder that our judgments, even those we think are purely personal preferences, are often heavily influenced by cultural biases and power dynamics.
That's why it's so crucial to acknowledge those biases and challenge those limited and often harmful beauty standards that perpetuate these inequalities.
Now, considering that this list and the comments are anonymous, it's safe to assume that they mostly reflect a male perspective on female beauty.
Right.
What do you think about that?
It's a fair assumption, and it's definitely important to consider how the male in you gaze shapes our understanding of beauty and contributes to the objectification of women's bodies.
But it's not a completely one-sided conversation.
Right.
There are comments defending celebrities like Lady Gaga, Nicki Minaj, and Rihanna.
Yeah.
Celebrating their unconventional beauty and how they embrace their own power.
Those comments offer a counter-narrative.
Yeah.
Challenging those dominant beauty ideals and showing a growing appreciation for diversity and individuality in what we consider beautiful.
It's almost like a tug of war between those traditional standards and a more inclusive, empowering perspective.
And that raises an important question for you, listener, whose voices are being amplified in these online spaces and whose are being silenced.
Whose perspective on beauty is considered valid and whose is dismissed.
Exactly.
That's something to really think about as we continue to navigate this complex and ever-changing landscape of beauty in the digital age.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been dissecting this ugliest female celebrities list.
Yeah.
And it's revealing some pretty disturbing trends about how society judges women based on their appearance.
And it's not just about, like, hurt feelings or fleeting opinions, you know? This constant pressure to fit into these incredibly narrow beauty standards can have serious consequences for women's mental and emotional well-being.
In the last part, we talked about how those judgments can be rooted in things like misogyny and racism.
Right.
But I'm curious, what kind of psychological impact does this have on women in general?
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be healthy to constantly be bombarded with messages about how you should look.
You're absolutely right to be concerned. Research shows that constant exposure to these idealized images, especially those that are totally unrealistic and unattainable, can lead to a lot of negative outcomes. We're talking body dissatisfaction, low self-esteem, and even eating disorders.
So it's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The media shows us these narrow beauty standards, often airbrushed and photoshopped, to achieve a level of perfection that doesn't even exist in real life.
Right.
And then women internalize those messages, compare themselves, and inevitably find themselves lacking.
Exactly. And this is where social media comes in and really amplifies the problem.
Oh, wow.
It's become this echo chamber where those unattainable beauty standards are not only celebrated, but also aggressively marketed.
It's not like the old days when you just see those images in a magazine or on TV.
Right.
Now it's everywhere, every time you scroll through your feed.
Yeah.
And it creates this constant pressure to measure up. It can be exhausting.
It is.
Trying to present a perfect version of yourself online.
And the algorithms are designed to keep you engaged, right? So they feed you more of what you've already clicked on.
Right.
Creating a personalized bubble of beauty ideals that can be really hard to escape.
It's almost like being trapped in this funhouse of mirrors where every reflection seems to magnify your flaws.
Yeah.
And then you've got filters and photo editing apps that blur the lines between reality and fantasy even further.
Those tools were originally intended for fun and creativity.
Right.
But they've become weapons in this battle for online validation.
Wow.
It reinforces the idea that you need to be perfect, or at least present yourself as perfect to be accepted.
It's scary to think about how this hyper-focus on appearance is affecting us.
Yeah.
Especially young people who are still figuring out who they are.
Yeah.
It's not just about how we look.
Yeah.
It's about how we feel about ourselves and how we interact with the world.
You're hitting on a crucial point. The messages we absorb during those formative years can have a lasting impact. Young people are bombarded with these images that tell them they need to be thin, flawless, and always on, and it can really distort those sense of self-worth.
It makes me wonder, what can we do to push back against these harmful messages? I mean, we can't just unplug from the world, can we?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
We can't completely escape these influences.
Right.
But we can learn to be more critical of them.
Okay.
And thankfully, there's a growing movement towards body positivity and self-acceptance that's starting to challenge those traditional beauty narratives.
So it's about embracing your natural beauty flaws and and defining beauty for yourself rather than letting society dictate it for you.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that beauty comes in all shapes, sizes, colors, and abilities. It's about celebrating what makes you unique rather than trying to fit into some impossible mold.
It's refreshing to see this shift happening. We're seeing more models, actresses, and influencers who are breaking the mold, embracing their curves, their wrinkles, their so-called imperfections. And that sends a powerful message.
It does.
Especially to those young people who are bombarded with those unattainable ideals.
It's about showing that beauty is not a one-size-fits-all concept.
Right.
It's about expanding our definition of beauty to include the full spectrum of human experience.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
But even with this shift, there's still a long way to go, right?
Absolutely. We need to keep having these conversations. Yeah. Keep pushing back against the status quo and keep advocating for greater representation and inclusion in the media and in our everyday lives.
And it's not just about demanding that the world change.
Right.
It's also about changing our own perceptions, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have to do the internal work as well.
You're spot on. It's about recognizing our own internalized biases.
Okay.
And learning to appreciate the beauty in ourselves and in others in all its forms.
So it's not just waiting for the media to change. It's about changing our own attitudes as well.
It's about cultivating a more compassionate view of ourselves and the people around us.
Okay.
Realizing that beauty isn't a fixed point. It's something that's constantly evolving.
It's about finding beauty in our imperfections, in our differences, and the messy reality of being human.
And that brings us back to this ugliest female celebrities list and all the judgments it represents.
So by dissecting those judgments, by understanding the deeper societal anxieties they reveal, maybe we can start to chip away at those harmful beliefs and create space for a more inclusive and empowering definition of beauty.
It's about recognizing that beauty isn't a weapon to be used against others, but a source of joy, confidence, and self-expression.
It's about reclaiming the power of beauty and using it to celebrate our individuality, our diversity, and our shared humanity.
And that's a message worth spreading.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've been talking about this ugliest female celebrities list. And how it reflects some pretty messed up ideas about beauty, especially for women.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the psychological impact of unattainable beauty standards to the role of social media in amplifying those harmful messages. But, it's not all doom and gloom. We've also talked about the growing movement towards body positivity and self-acceptance, which is super encouraging.
Right. It's been a roller coaster, for sure.
It has.
So for this last part, let's talk solutions. What can we actually do to challenge these beauty standards? I mean, they feel so ingrained in our culture. It can feel overwhelming,
I hear you. It can feel like an uphill battle, but even small changes can make a big difference.
Okay.
The first step is becoming aware of our own biases. We all have them, whether we realize it or not.
So like taking a moment to think about where our ideas about beauty come from.
Exactly. Are they from the media family, cultural background?
Right.
Once you start to recognize those influences, you can begin to question them.
Okay.
Ask yourself why you find certain features attractive or unattractive. Is it truly a personal preference, or is it something you've been conditioned to believe?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just accept those messages without even thinking about where they came from.
Right.
And what about the language we use? Does that play a role?
Absolutely. Words have power, and they can really reinforce those harmful stereotypes. It's about being mindful of the words we choose, both online and offline.
So like avoiding language that objectifies people or reduces them to just their appearance?
Exactly. Instead of focusing on physical attributes, try to highlight qualities that go beyond the superficial.
Okay.
Like someone's intelligence, kindness, creativity, or sense of humor.
And what about when we see someone being bullied or shamed for their looks? What's the best way to respond to that?
Silence can be complicity, so speaking up is crucial. It can be as simple as leaving a positive comment or reporting abusive content.
Right.
Even a small gesture can make a difference and show support for the person being targeted.
It's about creating a culture where that kind of behavior isn't tolerated, right? So what about social media? It feels like such a breeding ground for those unrealistic beauty standards.
It definitely can be, but you have control over what you see and who you interact with.
Okay.
Think about the accounts you follow. Do they make you feel good about yourself? Do they promote a diverse and inclusive view of beauty?
Right.
If not, maybe it's time to hit that unfollow button.
That's like taking charge of your own online experience. Fill your feed with content that inspires you and reflects the kind of world you want to see.
Exactly.
So we've talked about a lot of external stuff. But what about internal changes? How can we build our own self-esteem and feel more confident in our own skin?
That's so important. When you feel good about yourself from the inside out, it's much harder to be swayed by those external pressures.
So like focusing on our strengths and celebrating what makes us unique.
Exactly. Find activities that bring you joy and make you feel good.
Okay.
It could be spending time in nature, listening to music, creating art, whatever lights you up. And be patient with yourself. It takes time to unlearn those years of societal conditioning.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay.
We've been analyzing this list of ugliest celebrities.
Yeah.
But the real conversation is much bigger than that. It's about how we see ourselves and each other.
It's about developing a more critical and compassionate lens for judging beauty, both in yourself and in the world around you. It's about recognizing that true beauty isn't about conforming to some narrow ideal.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the incredible diversity and uniqueness of the human experience.
So what does beauty mean to you, listener?
Yeah.
How can you challenge those limiting definitions and cultivate a more inclusive and accepting view of beauty?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one.